Every Fallout fan is familiar with the main protagonist. Even the lesser known ones like the Initiates and Warrior still have some recognition. However, there are many, many others, 13 in fact, that never made it into the final versions of their respective games. These characters were either cut, replaced, or the game was cancelled entirely. In Fallout 1, the protagonist, as you all know, is the Vault Dweller, described as a 20-year-old, third-generation resident of Vault 13. The Vault Dweller might not be a random person, but one of the preset characters instead. Max Stone, Natalia Dubrovhsky, and Albert Cole are three potential protagonists, with Albert being the most popular stand-in for the Vault Dweller. He even appeared in the artwork celebrating Fallout's 25th anniversary, leading many to believe he was the official Vault Dweller, which I'd be fine with, even if this was later disproved. Although these characters are familiar to us, Fallout 1 initially planned to feature 7 Vault Dwellers, not just 3. The information we know about these characters comes from the Fallout official survival guide. The first protagonist, who never left the vault, so to speak, is Arnie, also known as Dutch. Born Arnold Black to Dutch parents, Arnie has always been a problem for the Vault. When he sits in chairs, he breaks them, when he goes through doors, he breaks the frame, and when he rumbles,
"I'll be back,"
bad things tend to happen. Next is Barney.
"I'm back!"
Arnie's younger brother. He's even bigger and stronger than Arnie, but he's also a bit on the slow side, leading many to call him Barney the Barbarian. He is the classic low intelligence character, played for laughs and not much else. Then there's Tanya McMillan, also known as Blade. Tanya is quick, agile, sharp, and bright, weighing around 105 pounds soaking wet, but moves like a cat, except in combat when she moves more like lightning. And the last Vault Dweller is Frank Charles Luciano, or Lucky for short. He was blessed with dashing good looks and a charming personality. His reputation as a Casanova has gotten him into trouble in the past. Some say the reason he volunteered to leave the vault had something to do with the Overseer's daughter, although that's just a rumour. Each of these 4 characters had their own tag skills and traits, adding to Fallout 1's replayability by offering different solutions to the same problems: finding a water chip, stopping the Master, and destroying the vats of FEV at Mariposa. The reason these characters ended up being cut likely boils down to their similarities with the ones we ultimately got. Arnold Black and his brother are basically 2 versions of Max Stone. Tanya is Natalia, and Frank is, for all intents and purposes, another Albert Cole. So losing these 4 playable characters isn't that extreme, unlike the characters cut from this next Fallout game. Fallout Extreme was a squad-based tactical shooter with both first and third-person gameplay. By 2000, it was already several months into development when the entire game was cancelled in late November that same year. The game would have taken place almost a century after the Great War, 20 years after Fallout 1. The Brotherhood of Steel, the once silent organisation, was expanding and seizing more and more territory under its control. Their area of influence stretched as far as Alaska, the location of their new headquarters. Local humans are either drafted into their ranks as cannon fodder or enslaved, something the Brotherhood didn't used to do, and mutants are outright eradicated, which is a familiar concept. They are whom the player would oppose during the first half of the game, and speaking of the player, they would control a squad of revolutionaries known as the Cause. Throughout the game, they would gain momentum, starting in Oregon, then north through Washington, Canada, and eventually reaching Alaska. Each reclaimed town would vow loyalty to the Cause, increasing their strength and power until they were strong enough to rival the Brotherhood. Since the game was cancelled, the intended protagonists were never used, and just like Fallout 1's missing main characters, there were 4 of them. The first revolutionary to accomplish nothing is Abel. Abel was to be the leader of the Cause who helped get the revolution off the ground, and would have done most of the talking when the initial group started their journey towards the north. Joining him was Big Betty, one of the good super mutants involved in the cause, the heaviest supporter, the sternest, and the most intimidating. The group wouldn't be complete without its resident smartass either, and filling that role would have been Caleb, who specialised in handling precision weaponry. He is all about accuracy, no wasted shots, doesn't mind showing off either, so while he was a smartass, he at least had the skills to back it up. And the fourth and final member of this cancelled team is Uber Dan. He would have specialised in explosives, had very steady hands and steady nerves, couldn't get excited about anything, even when the extra adrenaline would have come in handy. Not exactly the hero, better at staying alive, or at least he would have been, if he'd even lived in the first place. Fallout Extreme is a game I wish I could have experienced, or at least parts of it, but I know that will never happen, just like the protagonist from the original Fallout 3 will also never happen. Of course, Fallout Extreme wasn't the only game to be scrapped. Van Buren made it much further along before suffering the same fate. Van Buren was the codename Black Isle Studio assigned to their second iteration of Fallout 3. It was in development until its cancellation on December 8, 2003. The game would have begun with the player trapped inside Tibbet's prison facility, giving the player a choice. The player could choose to be an innocent person who was imprisoned because of some misunderstanding, or they could choose to be a criminal and take bonus traits that would bolster some of their skills. The player would awaken in a prison cell, but not the cell they remembered falling asleep in. Suddenly there's an explosion, and the player is knocked unconscious. When they awake, they find their cell door open and a hole in the wall leading outside. Naturally, the player flees into the night to explore this new world. Since every story needs a hero, in Van Buren you would have played as the prisoner. Unlike the Chosen One from Fallout 2, this character wasn't meant to be a descendant of the Vault Dweller or any of the other Vault 13 inhabitants. However, despite this distinction, the prisoner is seen wearing a jumpsuit similar to the one worn by the Vault Dweller, the same colours, and even the number 13 displayed on the back. Curiously, early concept art initially depicted the prisoner with the numbers 114, but the number was changed so they could reference both Vault 13 and the original Vault Dweller who kicked off the series. Unfortunately, the game was cut, and in a way, the prisoner never left their cell, which is a real shame because some of the concept art for this game is beautiful. Boulder Dome, Gas Bots, Vault 69. I'll never forgive Interplay for that one. But I am willing to forgive them for scrapping the main characters from Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2, the sequel to everyone's favourite Fallout game.
Out of nowhere, an army of giants called mutants appeared. They slaughtered many people and altered many more to add to their numbers. The Brotherhood of Steel, self-appointed knights of the wasteland, arose to drive off the mutants. They gave humanity peace and a glimmer of hope.
Fallout Brotherhood of Steel 2, also known as Vagrant Lands, was cancelled only a few months after the first game released due to low sales. It would have incorporated story elements from Van Buren, Caesar's Legion for example, as well as the irradiated Gek, similar to the prototype Gek from Fallout Tactics 2, which is another cancelled game, but we aren't here to talk about that one because we don't know anything about the protagonist or group we would have controlled. Even so, this game would have taken place in Texas, and for the third time, there's 4 protagonists who never saw the light of day. The first missing main is Lilith. Like most recruits, she grew up in the Brotherhood of Steel. She's also extremely hot-tempered and rash, but her abilities with ranged weapons are unmatched, so most of the elders put up with her attitude, simply because of her potential. Next is Hafe, or described as a short man with a small neck and a beatnik goatee. Like Lilith, he grew up in the Brotherhood of Steel, and from an early age he was fascinated by fire. He also had a fascination with taking things apart and putting them back together again. As time went on, he was sent to the Brotherhood's demolitions department for research and development, but as the tension between the NCR and the Brotherhood mounted, they pulled him for active duty. Then there's Maxis. He was a teenager when he ran into a Brotherhood of Steel paladin, who convinced him to join the Brotherhood. While Maxis doesn't like small guns, the large ones in the Brotherhood's arsenal impressed him so much he decided to stay. Oddly enough, he's the only playable character with a connection to the previous game, as his father is Cyrus, and putting their concept art side by side reveals they are pretty much identical. And lastly, not just for the Brotherhood of Steel 2, but for the video, is Scarlet. She is labelled in design documents as an albino hottie? Yep. Because Scarlet was born an albino, her concept art doesn't have any colour. Actually, I don't know why her artwork is so plain, but her fellow citizens immediately left her out to die in the desert because of her unique appearance. An old mutant named Harold found her and took her in. She travelled with him all over California, listening to his tales of adventure with the Vault Dweller. Finally, when she was old enough, she joined the Brotherhood of Steel, thinking that she would one day return to her birthplace and raze it to the ground. Her initial tests showed a certain moral ambiguity that led her into the Brotherhood's Special Ops division. There she learned the art of snipers and stealth, becoming one of the best Black Op agents the Brotherhood had ever seen. Considering how well the first game performed, I don't think we missed out on much. These 4 initiates wouldn't have added anything the first game hadn't already. Still, it's sad to see intended protagonists not being used, or at the very least recycled into other games as side characters or even antagonists. And that is every missing main character that I could find. Protagonists meant to lead their own stories but never had the chance to do so. While many of these characters may have felt familiar or redundant, there's something about the ones that never made it into the final versions of the games, or didn't even get a game, that just adds a bit of mystery to the Fallout universe. If nothing else, they represent the what-ifs and missed opportunities of the series, especially Fallout Extreme with a semi-villainous Brotherhood of Steel. I would like to see that. But what about you? Which of these lost protagonists would you bring back if you could? A super mutant with a moral compass, a John Doe with no backstory at all, or someone with a dark past that drives them onwards? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.